We have to understand this principle here. We are on page Ches, on the bottom, Ois Daled. We already started Ois Daled several times, so we are going to go a little further. We'll start on the third line of that place. We did not discuss Rotzen sufficiently, we'll still do. It says, Sechel, all koiches, kam, means they express themselves behagbola, with a boundary and his chalkus. His chalkus means with a content, detailed content. So we took as an example Sechel. And we said Sechel, which is the highest of the koiches, does not come forth, does not reveal itself without boundary. This we discussed yesterday. And we still will have a chance to clarify further. That Sechel, again, we refer to Oyer Sechel. And this is important for us to do. This is important to be repeating all the time, because Sechel, what we commonly call Sechel, on the secular level, is not Sechel at all. You can figure out how many pieces there are on the table, or how many pieces there will be if we filled up 2 tables. This is not Sechel. Sechel is called Oyer Sechel. Oyer, as we explained already several times, means that there is nothing compelling about Oyer. Oyer is an intangible in it. How then do you know it? If it's not compelling, if it's not forcing itself upon you. The Gashmi is, we can understand how you know it, because you touch it, it prevents you from going through it. But how do you identify with Oyer? And the answer is, because we have this faculty that's called Sechel, that can relate to what's called to the reality, to truth. Which means that in Oyer, this is what Oyer, you identify with the truth of it rather than its tangible and its boundaries. Like we gave the example, I'm going to repeat this so that if you were to walk through a room trying to avoid bumping into tables and chairs, you would be identifying tables and chairs on the tangible level, and you would actually be avoiding. You would feel the object, and you would avoid it. You would feel the object, its presence, and the fact that it occupies space, it doesn't let you go through, and you go around it. If you have light, and you have to go through this labyrinth, you're not avoiding bumping into the table. You're walking where the proper way to walk. The table is not in your way at all. Because you see the reality. The table is there because it belongs there, and the space around the table is there because it belongs there. And that is what you really. In other words, with Oyer, you relate to and you always say the reality. In other words, why is it there? What does it stand for? And you relate to it. You don't want the floor to be empty of tables. Exactly, that is the reason you're here. This is what Oyer. Oyer relates to. Let me give an example, which we all also it's not new. But there's no. It's never too many times to repeat this in here because we are in such. Our training is in totally opposite perspective. If you encounter a wall, so you encounter the physicality of the wall. You threw it in the ground, it stands. Two walls, so they reinforce themselves. Three walls, they reinforce themselves. They stand because they are solidly built. This is why they're there. When you have four walls, which means it represents a home, a house, has a completely different concept. It's a completely different spirit. Oyer, why? What's this? How come it's standing? It's standing because human beings wanted to stand. Not standing happens to be standing there. And the Oyer Sechel relates to this reality of it. It's there because it has a human meaning, not because it has a physical presence. So, even though Sechel has this refinement, and it relates to Oyer, but the Oyer Sechel, the Oyer that is identified with Sechel, has a Hagbola.
Or you mentioned yesterday about the difference between the haratzin and seichel, and we gave a mashal that by haratzin it's like two people sitting, like two friends sitting across each other by the table conversing, and by seichel we gave a mashal of someone sitting at a table and learning a sefer. So I was wondering, like, what's the distinction between these two activities?
Okay, just 1 second. What did you have in mind?
It was about this or seichel and this element of being limited. Or seichel seems to be a perception of infinity, and yet at the same time we're saying mugbal, defined, limited.
Right. This is what we discussed yesterday. When two people sit across a table and they find it meaningful to sit across a table rather than to sit on a bench and converse and relate. What provides this meaning? There is no, they don't use the table. What provides us meaning?
To remain on this call, press 1.
Okay. There is no functional meaning to this. The presence of a table in that case is due to the fact like this. We have all kinds of koiches. We have koiches, dibur, machshava, and dibur, and ma'aseh. We have midas, we have sechel, and we have rotz. All the koiches below the rotzin have a definitive presence. So if a seichel would be relating to a table, it would have a definition. What is a table about? A rotzin, on the other hand, is a representation of the etzem hanefesh, of the nefesh on. This table between two friends represents the fact that these two friends relate at a higher level than on the practical and definitive level. They really feel each other's presence. And when a person's presence expresses itself, it expresses itself with all its glory, so to speak, with all the human elements, with the enrichment that a human being represents, to being in a home and being by a table and being on a chair and so forth. If you were relating to him only on a practical level, you wouldn't need all these things. And if you were not a very close friend, you're not relating at that level of a personal relationship. Not a personal relationship, it's a business discussion. A business discussion, I can discuss it under any circumstances. I don't have to bring my spirit into it. Do we see the thing there? Rotzain comes with his galus, it says on the third line, his pashtus built to mugbelis. It comes with his galus, it reveals itself. It doesn't need to be identified. It is revealed. With his pashtus built to mugbelis without limit. Because it's a statement Let's step back a moment. The difference between Rotzen and Sechel on a very broad scale is Rotzen does not have to justify itself. This is my Rotzen, this is who I am. Sechel has to justify itself. Does it make sense? What's in it? Even Oyer Sechel has to have some kind of a meaning. Rotzen does not require any justification. What somebody called? How come? There was nobody there. That's why I called.
Well, late, I don't know.
Okay, let's continue on the third line, the end of the third line. Again, we're talking about Oyer HaSeichel. The Oyer HaSeichel means that element in Seichel that is identified on the Oyer level, on the reality level. even that is behagbal. As we explained yesterday as an example, that a person to live in the Empire State Building as a personal dwelling will not be satisfied, because he cannot relate to it on the Sechel level. שבו בהגבול לבד מה שהוא בעיר פרט דובר, besides the fact that the Sechel is identified and focuses on a prat dover, on some specific aspect, shekein hu gam berotz. This meaning that there is a prat dover, there is a specific element on which Sechel is set, is true in Rotzen also. In Rotzen also there is a prat dover. So the distinction that you are making between Rotzen and Sechel, that Rotzen is not mugbal, and Sechel is mugbal, is not due to this aspect that Sechel is beprat and a prat. But this. It's not due to the prat. Hine etzem ha'oir v'hagilui ha'oir mugbal. This is an amazing thing, as we pointed out also yesterday. The oil itself is an oil mugbal. Oil is not a tangible thing, and yet this oil in Sechel has a hagbal, which means it is an oil that has a focus, and it has a circumscription, so to speak. It identifies with a limit, and intentionally, not because it's focused on an object, but because it is focused in a limited fashion. Like we said yesterday, if you shine a flashlight on an object, which enables you to see that particular object, it's also oil, but that oil is a focused oil, and this is the way the oil Sechel comes. Oil Rotzen does not come this way. Oil Rotzen is an expression of the nefesh. Sechel comes in this fashion with a hagbal. And I want to take a moment, just give us a little bit of a handle on this, and then we'll be able to understand it even better. Both Sechel and the Rotzen are emanations from the nefesh. Rotzen is clearly, this is a Rotzen HaNefesh, this is a nation of nefesh. And it's got many times. The whole phenomenon of Rotzen is the force of life in the nefesh. Sechel is a derivative of that gilui of the nefesh. And the reason that we understand certain things like all these subtle things that we understand is because we have an oil HaNefesh in the Sechel. We sense in our Sechel the difference between a human being and an animal. This is not a tangible thing. This is the Sechel. It is tangible, but it's not based on tangibility. It's based on a concept. I'm going very, very quickly with this. There is a phenomenal difference between the Rotzen, when the Rotzen comes, when the Sechel comes. Rotzen emanates from the source, like we said before, Rotzen is there because I want. Sechel is there because I'm being convinced, I'm being shown something. Not because I know. Although it is also dependent on Rotzen, as we said many times. You don't understand unless you want to understand. But it is not the wanting of understanding that creates a sechel. Something is being shown, something is being identified, and then you understand that which is being identified. But sechel is something which is being taught. Rotzen is not being taught. Rotzen is that which comes directly from the nefesh. This is the difference between Nase and Nishma. In both instances, Nase and Nishma, I have to be told what to do, and I have to be told what to understand. But there's a big difference. In Nase, before you tell it to me, I'm already ready to do it. Which means that I'm completely dedicated before anything is said. Nishma means I will then absorb it, and I'll be able to relate to it with my sechel. So this is already something which I'm taking in, or it's being shown to me, and it is not something that I know beforehand. Nasa is something which I know beforehand.
Is the point here that the seichel is almost it compels the person, because it compels the person as much as if it makes sense, it has to make sense, and you can't ignore that, as opposed to Rotzein, where it's part of it. I identify it not because it's being imposed upon me, but because it's a reality which I associate with.
Well, there's similarity to this, but this is not correct. Seichel is not compelling. As you said, you don't understand unless you want to understand.
Yeah, but you can't deny when something, it's almost external in the sense that you can't deny when something makes sense. You can't deny that it makes sense. It's being imposed upon you. You can't ignore the fact that it's coming from an external source and the logical structure.
You can ignore it. Compel means something that touches you. And we said before, oil is not compelling. Adoba Gashmi is compelling. Mm-hmm. Sechel is not compelling. Sechel is also oil. But,
when you recognize something's true, though, there's a very strong impact.
But truth on the level of Sechel is meaningful only if you want to relate to truth. The point which I'm making in terms of right now in the Sechel, what's the difference between the Nasa and the Nishma in concept? Nasa means I'm not taking what you're telling me by its boundaries and by its content. I'm accepting what you put into it. Mm-hmm. Which means that I'm relating to you at a different level. It is person to person. Whereas Nishma, I'm relating to my Sechel. I'm taking, there is a means through which we are relating, that's the Sechel. That means that this is the Pshat, and in Sechel there is an inherent Hagbolah. Okay, I already overstayed, right? Not yet. both in this Nase v'Nishma, in the Rotzen and in the Sechel aspect, in both instances, I am relating to it because it comes from you. Like we said many times, learning Torah is not by our investigation. Learning Torah is I'm being taught, and I learn what I'm being taught. So it's both in both instances there's the Ayin that who I'm getting it from that makes it that is a decisive factor. The difference though is that in Nasa
Disconnected.
In Nasa it is it's exclusively where I'm getting it from. It doesn't go through my process. You said, and it's being done. In Sechel, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, you said, and I want to understand, and then I understand. It's an next step. Which means, to begin with, I'm getting something with a definition. And I relate to it because of its definition. Whereas in Rotzen, I relate to it because of the source where it's coming from.
And in terms of our own personal experiences, would be that where Rotzen we want something because we want it, and Seichel we want something because we understand its value, or we understand its truth, or something like that.
Right. But true. This is what I'm putting out. You understand the truth, but that understanding and significant understanding is also due to Rotzen. It's an oil sale.
Mm-hmm. But it comes with Bala, because if it doesn't make sense, then I
don't know what you
don't want it. I could still want it in terms of my Ratzin. It doesn't have to necessarily make sense. I could just...
In Rotzen, the connection is not to what you said, but to who said it. In Seichel, also there is who said it. But you can't relate directly, you relate to what is being said. All right, to be continued in Mitzvah Shem.
Shalom,